going, guys? Are we good? Are we streaming live on the internet? Excellent. I shall be polite. Thank you all for coming. As always, awesome to see new faces and old faces. A few thank yous. Thank you to Wood Mackenzie, Claire, Fraser, and the guys for putting this on and hosting it. Thank you to our two awesome speakers. Sean's going to start, and then we've got Stuart afterwards, who spoke for us last year. Thank you all for coming. These events don't really work without you guys. It's not us that make these events work. Nothing really more from me, so I shall let Sean crack on and introduce himself and go from there.
Great. Thank you, Stu. And thank you for the opportunity to give my talk today. I'll be talking about the need for HTTPS, trying to discuss what we actually require HTTPS for, and go into details around HTTPS and why it's so important. So a little bit about myself. I'm a security lead at SecureWorks. I'm also the OS Scotland chapter leader, or one of them, and just a little blurb, 4 views on my own. And you can find me on Twitter at Sean Rutzak. So I'm going to try to describe HTTPS, just give a very brief overview of what it is, what it actually does, and how it actually protects us. So this was a blurb taken from Komodo. So Komodo is a large CA. I think they were the largest CA till Let's Encrypt overtook them. And one of the important things I wanted to point out here was the encrypted and hence private. Now, when people look at HTTPS, they always think protecting data, protecting passwords, protecting secrets that you enter. Here's another example. What happened was NatWest was providing a landing page. It was over plain HTTP. And Troy Hunt picked up on this. So those of you who don't know, Troy Hunt's a really great researcher, Australian. He owns Have I Been Born. And he picked up on this. And one of the responses from NatWest was, well, the page is serving public information, which it was, and there was no secret information entered on there. But that's not quite the case, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate why. So when we talk about security, we often think of these 3 primary principles: confidentiality, making sure that the data is transmitted and prevented from eavesdropping. So you're preventing unauthorized people from having access to that data. The next is integrity. So making sure that data is actually prevented from tampering. So unauthorized people cannot tamper with that data. And then finally, availability. Making sure that unauthorized people can not prevent legitimate access to that data. And HTTPS helps ensure 2 of them. It prevents eavesdropping, and it also ensures that the data transmitted between the client and the server is actually as it was meant. So here's an example of a typical man in the middle. You've got 2 entities trying to communicate with one another, Alice and Bob, and you've got Evil Eve that inserts himself in the middle. So they'll see all the information traveling between Alice and Bob, and they can also manipulate that information, turning that into a server-based. You've got 2 PCs, a desktop and a server, and then you've got an attacker that inserts themselves in the man in the middle. As you can see, they can intercept the traffic. So HTTPS helps us in terms of encrypting the data. So as from the previous example, but now the data is encrypted. Sending it to the attacker is not going to be able to notice or understand that data. It's going to mean nothing to the attacker. Now, one of the things the attacker could do is still manipulate that data. Take that 8 in the beginning, for example. What if I change it to 9? But the data ending up on the server is going to be completely different. So again, HTTPS comes to help with something called a MAC, a message authentication code. And it's a way of enforcing integrity. So there's an example with the MAC. And the MAC's generated on the data that is sent and transmitted with the encrypted data. The receiving entity would then take the map and ensure that it matches the data that it received. So these two slides, or sorry, graphs, give a really good illustration in terms of where HTTPS is going. As you can see, it's growing exponentially. A large part of that is definitely due to the likes of Let's Encrypt, where certificates are now free, and Let's Encrypt has also made the implementation of TLS via installing certificates and maintaining them a lot easier. And it's so much so that it's now the largest CA in the world. Also, HTTPS is becoming default. So Firefox recently announced at the beginning of the year that all new features will only be supported over TLS, or HTTPS. Chrome, as of July 2018 this year, or 2018, will now mark all plain HTTP sites as not secure. In addition, Google now improve your SEO rating if your site's over HTTPS. You get an improved reputation, so those users visiting your site can have faith that your site is legitimate and no one's tampered with it. And then you also prevent your site becoming a launch base for further attacks. So one of the interesting things around security, there's some controversy in terms of trying to enforce best practices by default. And this was a spat that started on Twitter. And I don't want to go into the gory details, but there are some out there who, for their own reasons, some of them are legitimate, it's our jobs as security professionals to try to illustrate why it is important, why we're saying what we're saying. So I've talked about HTTPS, and one of the things I mentioned was man in the middle. So the next few slides will cover how an attacker will get man in the middle. So there's several ways, op spoof, DNS poisoning, or physical, so a wireless access point, or even inserting a piece of hardware onto the network. So this here is a Raspberry Pi. I'm sure everyone in the room knows what it's like, or what device it is. And it costs about 40 bucks, and you can easily do a man-in-the-middle attack with this. I'll show you, you'll see later a video that illustrates this. And these are a few other devices that you can purchase. So a hackathon is a site that you can actually go and buy all these devices from. It's totally legitimate. And yeah, so packet squirrel device that you can insert into a network, plug it into the Ethernet switch, and you've got open VPN connection to that device so you can start sniffing packets. LAN turtle, similar concept, plug it into a PC. It's also got a 3G modem on it, so you can do out-of-band distribution of packets back to your server, wherever you have that. And then lastly, my favorite is the Wi-Fi pineapple. And the devices don't cost much, 40 bucks. Wi-Fi pineapple is a little bit more expensive, but I mean, it's realistic for every man on the street to afford those. So the next one is DNS spoofing. So this involves in attacking the DNS protocol. So the DNS protocol is you have a host name, it resolves to an IP address, and the attacker will try to spoof that so the IP address then, the DNS or the host name resolves to an IP address which they control instead of the legitimate server. Access point, which is what my demonstration's about later, you will try get the victim to connect to a access point that you control. This could either be by social engineering or other tricks such as deauth and all of that. And those are available on the Wi-Fi pineapple. So one of the things that I also hear is that's all great. You can get man in the middle, but these seem kind of edge cases. Well, take the bigger picture. This would be a typical home user. They have a wireless router at home, so I could use my Wi-Fi pineapple to try to spoof that. You've got a phone exchange, you've got an ISP, you've got the big wide world of internet who knows how many computers and networks out there, and then finally you reach the data center and hit the server. There are so many points that the traffic's got to hit that someone could potentially intercept that. And don't get me wrong, VPNs are really important, but they only protect you up to a point, and that's going to be the point of the VPN server. If it's plain HTTP connection, it's still got to go plain HTTP from the VPN server to the data center. HTTPS, on the other hand, is end-to-end encryption. It will encrypt from the server all the way to the user. Excuse me. So, talked about man in the middle. I talked about how HTTPS protects you, but equally important is making sure that you do it right. Because if you do it wrong, you could potentially have false security and be in a similar position of not using HTTPS. So one of the ways an attacker could bypass HTTPS essentially is still do man in the middle, but then serve up a HTTP connection between themselves and the victim. This means they don't have to worry about the client, the server certs, and as long as the user's not paying attention, they could possibly enter their credentials and so on and so forth and sniff it, even modify the traffic. The other way is man in the middle again, but they compromise the certificates. And there's several ways of doing that. You could, that's why it is bad to click through screens like that. That's a good indication that someone's got a man in the middle. Because the certificate that's been served up there is possibly spoofed. And one of these are the reasons, perhaps. So there's several ways that you can compromise a key. It's either left out there on the web, or you trust a rogue CA, or the CA is rogue itself, or you don't do sufficient certificate validation. So this case happened with Google last year, where they found Symantec were issuing certificates for their domains, but no one at Google was actually requesting those certificates. And that's why now you've probably seen in the news, Chrome will no longer trust certificates signed by Symantec before they moved over to DigiCert. Compromised keys are a real issue. DJI is a rather large drone maker. They had a wildcard cert. The private key for the cert was left on GitHub, publicly accessible. Microsoft, while not as bad, they had a sandbox wildcard cert. That private key was publicly accessible. And then you also had the likes of Heartbeat, which could leak the keys. This is a pretty recent one. Trustico, for whatever reason, they wanted to revoke a whole bunch of CAs. The CA provider said you have to have a legitimate need to revoke them. In other words, the key's been compromised or whatever. So what did they do? They intentionally sent out the private keys over email to compromise the cert. And as I mentioned, you have incorrect certificate validation. So this piece of code here turns off all validation. So essentially, the client running this would then trust all certificates, self-signed, rogue, revoked, whatever. And that will allow a man in the middle with as easy as a plain HTTP. Something else to consider is mixed content. So this is when you have a page loading over plain HTTP, HTTPS, and you have some content within that page. Typically static content, pictures, images, JavaScript, CSS, and those are loaded over plain HTTP. Attacker can manipulate those. In Chrome, it shows up as a warning like that. I wish they'd maybe make it a little bit more obvious, but you can go to developer tools and actually see the error a bit more. So this one was pretty interesting that I found. So this is a password reset email. So you click on the link and you can go reset your password. Right? So here's a HTTPS. getpocket.com. Secure, right? Well, no. There was a plain HTTP link. You clicked on it, and it went to a plain HTTP. It got worse. As part of that link, it sent the token that's used to reset your password. And there's similar ones. This is something I've noticed carrying on a common occurrence in emails is there are a lot of plain text links in emails. So this is another example where view the email online, and that's all over plain HTTP. So you essentially could change the entire email. So I've blogged about that on my personal blog. So we talked about how an attacker could get a man in the middle. We also talked about weaknesses in terms of implementing HTTPS. So what can I do with that? Well, this was an example that I found with Ubisoft. So those who don't know, Ubisoft is a gaming company. And they sent the login URL via JSON response. And I managed to downgrade the connection to HTTP so I could actually man in the middle of this JSON response and change it to a YouTube video, which resulted in, instead of a login page, a YouTube video being displayed instead. Now, this is obviously very benign, but an attacker would put up their own spoofed YouTube page, and then the user would enter it. One of the northern African countries, I think, did this with Facebook. Facebook at the time didn't serve the landing page in HTTP. You enter in your username and password, and it would go over HTTPS, and the government just did an injection, and they could sniff the user's passwords and emails, or usernames. Another thing is beef. You'll see this in a bit. Not the cow, but browser exploitation framework. I really love this tool. It's a great tool. Probably not for the right reasons, but this is another example. So this was Syria and Iran. They used unencrypted connections to inject spyware so they could start spying on their citizens. And then obviously the big craze is crypto mining. This is becoming more and more of an issue. And there's actually a tool on GitHub that you can use to inject crypto miners over Wi-Fi. So to sum all of that up before I go into the live demos, is HTTPS is not just about protecting the sensitive data that you transmit. It's about protecting it as well as the integrity of that data. And Swift on security, I think, sums it up really well. It is encryption, but it's also encryption with integrity insurance. And I think that's the key. All right. So as I mentioned, I'm going to show you a little demo of how I managed to do man in the middle with a Raspberry Pi. Sorry, just bear with me. Apologize for the really bad quality. There we go. So what I was doing there was just doing an mmap scan to find the device, because I just plugged it onto the network. So there's the device there. So now I'm just going to SSH into the device, and I am going to run Ettercap. Now, what Ettercap is doing is an ARP spoof, similar to DNS. ARP spoof works on a lower level using the MAC address to IP, and I'm ARP spoofing my gateway. So that way I'm going to sniff all the traffic on the network. And the output will go to dump.txt, which is a TCP dump. So now I'm going to go visit a plain text site. In this case, hackyourselffirst.troyhunt.com, and loads over plain HTTP. I'm just going to visit another page. Okay. I'm going to stop my scan. And I am going to download the dump to my computer so I can view it. So I'm going to now view it in in Wireshark, which is what most people use to view packet captures. And I'm going to filter out for port 80 and HTTP. So in other words, to try to find that traffic that I navigated to. As you can see, it shows up there. And if I go view the packets, I will be able to see the plain text that was sent. So in this case, I'm viewing a request that I made. If I expand that, there's a request. I'll go view another request. So that was a landing page that I requested. And then that's the response that I got in return. Yep. So now's the actual demo time. See how well this is going to work. Sorry, one moment. Yeah, I'll try to do this as best as I can. So what I'm holding here is a Wi-Fi pineapple. That's all it is. And yes, it even gets through airport security. So I'm now going to just plug it into my PC. Oh, actually, I've got to set it up. So sorry, forgot to switch it. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I am going to set up the Wi-Fi pineapple so I can actually start using it. And what the script is doing is actually setting up internet connection sharing for the Wi-Fi pineapple. So all traffic that I hit through the Wi-Fi pineapple will be able to go out via the internet. Okay, so I will now. So I thought it was important to show you this because I'm just trying to illustrate that there's no magic wizardry going on behind the scenes. All of this is provided with the Wi-Fi pineapple. And it's as basic as running a couple of scripts to get it up and running. So I just have to reset my network wireless because otherwise it doesn't work for some strange reason. Okay, so this is the admin interface for the Wi-Fi Pineapple. I won't spend too much time, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to enable the wireless interface on it, as well as set up the AP that is going to start broadcasting. So that's the wireless interface running, and now I'm going to start broadcasting the APs that I've set up there. So if you have a look, you'll now see there's two APs, free Wi-Fi and demo Wi-Fi. You won't be able to connect to them because I've only allowed this computer to connect to it. But when I didn't have that, it was about 3 or 4 minutes, and I already had 2 other clients connecting to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is run a script that's going to set up IP tables. So it's going to route all the traffic that's on port 80 and 443 from the Wi-Fi Pineapple and go to my Burp Suite on port 8080. So now I'm going to start up Burp Suite. And the reason why I'm doing this is it just makes it a lot easier to view the traffic as well as manipulate it. So I'm just going to set this up really quickly. So now I'm going to listen on the Wi-Fi Pineapple interface as well as support invisible proxy. So this makes it so the client doesn't realize that it's a proxy. All right, so switching back to this PC now. I'm just going to switch my display really quickly. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just simply connect to the AP that I created. So now this is this computer connecting to my Wi-Fi Pineapple. And now I'm connected. I'm already getting errors because certificates are being rejected because now I'm actually manning in the middle my connections. Get out of this for some reason. All right. So now I'm going to go to a plain site called scripting.com. All right. So this is served over plain HTTP. So it's taking a bit long because I'm going by my phone. All right. So this site served over HTTP. Now I'm going to come back to this computer in a bit. So I'm going to back to this laptop with the Wi-Fi Pineapple because I actually want to show what it's like to actually do the intercept. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to open up a new tab so I can actually see the difference. So now I'm going to intercept the traffic, and on this PC, I'm just going to clear my cache because that page is plain HTTP, so it's going to be cached. So this makes this attack even worse because any changes you make will be cached. So you can already see that's a request made to the site. I've intercepted the request. Now what I'm going to do is intercept the response, and I will forward that. So here's a request, the response from the site, and I'm going to start manipulating a few items on the page. So that's the title of the page. Oh, actually, what's going on here? Sorry, I'm just trying to get to the actual next content. There, okay. Wow, this was totally different earlier on today. I promise. All right, that's what I was looking for. So now I'm going to manipulate this as well. Yeah, and I'm going to forward that on. So what's going to happen now on this PC, it's now going to get those changes. And there we go. So comparing it between this page, which had scripting news, both in the title and the heading of the page, it's even worse than it appears. It now has HTTPS is great as the title, HTTPS is great as the page title, and HTTPS is a must-have. So I've actually manipulated the actual content of the page. If you imagine this is a news site, you could actually manipulate the content, creating fake news. The last thing we're going to show is the beef framework. And this is probably the most shocking. So just bear with me a second. All right. So this is because I initially connected to it earlier on. But what I'm going to do now is inject a beef hook. And all it is a simple JavaScript core. So again, on this side, I'm just going to intercept again and then inject the hook. Okay, so that's the hook now injected into the page. And I'm going to send it on its way. And with luck, we should now see this pop up as an online browser. It just takes a couple of seconds. There we go. So just by visiting the page with me injecting the beef hook, I already got all of this information there. So some of the other things you can do. LastPass detects if you've got a LastPass, which is somewhere in amongst that, third from the top. So what you could do is possibly create spoof password fields, get the user to enter it, start fetching information from it. You can get cookies, so execute that. There's my cookies that are currently in the browser. I can get the HTML of the current page. Takes, again, a couple of seconds. There we go. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things you can do here. Some of them are actual vulnerabilities and exploits they can execute. I just want to show two other things, and for that, I'm going to go to this for one final time. Right, so the thing I really like is Clippy. So you've all seen those things online. You've got a virus, click here, or your browser's out of date, click here. Beef provides something called Clippy. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, you now see it pop up. Click on it, you can imagine that could be some malware that the user will then install. And then one of the other really cool things I like is the redirect. So I'm not going to redirect the user to a page that I've chosen. And off they go. So yeah, it's bad. So yeah. No. So when it comes to HTTPS, should always try to use it wherever possible. Obviously, there might be cases where it's not feasible, but try out wherever you can. And yeah, thank you.
Questions, anybody?
So just playing devil's advocate here a little bit. So you mentioned the likes of Let's Encrypt, and obviously there are ones like Cloudflare as well, which have a slightly different model. Obviously, bad actors are also leveraging the falsehood, which is the beautiful green padlock. What would you say to people that say that free certs is a bad idea because it removes that barrier to cyber criminals?
So they certainly have a point. One of the things we as an industry have not done a good job of is advocating that green lock equals secure. So yes, green lock is secure. There's no doubt about it. The connection to that site is secure. It doesn't mean the site is legitimate. There are cases where, as you mentioned, bad guys will use that as a means to gain that trust that typically non-technical folk would have to then further exploit their phishing attack. So I recently was doing a blog, and one of the things that I wrote on it was this very point around phishing, how HTTPS actually sometimes helps the bad guys do phishing. And one of the things I came across when I was doing it was PayPal. PayPal is a very good example. And the example I gave when I just went into, I think it was Census, and I just entered PayPal. I found loads and loads and loads of sites with PayPal. But a lot of them weren't actual legitimate PayPal accounts. And the one I actually went to, the server company shut the servers down. And one can gather why that was the case. So it is a problem. How are we going to solve it? I don't know. There are systems, and I think Chrome and them do it to some extent, of trying to detect phishing sites, but it's not an easy one to solve.
It's because you all build websites in HTTPS, don't you? The best example I've seen of this is, did you see when Russia put troops into the Ukraine? Somebody did this very thing on Russia Today, I think it was, and replaced every word of Russia with Nazi. Did you see that? About 2-3 years ago? It was up there for about 2 or 3 hours. Cool. No more questions for Sean? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've probably got a couple of minutes while Stuart gets ready. If anybody wants any more pizza or beer, there's plenty of stuff in the back.
That's right, take a bunch of style. Testing, testing.
Right, guys, we're going to get started again shortly. If you'd like to take your seats. So there's a loud crowd at the back. Welcome back. Welcome back to the people. We had 20 people online before. That's a record. Trust me. Because everyone's tweeting it. Thank you very much. So I'm not going to introduce Stuart. He spoke for us last year, and it was awesome, and this is going to be awesome. Thank you to Sean for doing an equally awesome presentation. So over to Stuart.
It's really built me up now. I'm just going to completely disappoint everyone. Hello, my name's Stuart Peck. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Strategy for Zero Day Lab. I also run a community called the Many Hats Club you may have heard of or may not have heard of, and if not, you may hear about it later. I'm here to talk about that wonderful topic, OPSEC, that everyone loves talking about. But I'm actually going to talk about it from lessons from World War II, because actually I was having a talk with someone the other week about OPSEC, and we're talking about how bad my OPSEC is sometimes, but we'll talk about that in a second. And really wanted to talk about some of the lessons that have been lost over the years that actually we can really drill down from some of those propaganda posters from World War II. So I really want to talk a bit about that as well. But for those that don't know me, I have a bit of an odd journey into InfoSec. So I started out as a potter, actually. I did a degree in ceramics at university. So ceramics to cybersecurity is the perfect career path, I've been told by many people. I then actually ended up in recruitment, so everyone hates me. And now I am in cybersecurity, so I like memes, basically. But that's my journey, and I want to talk about some experience, because I've done a lot of open source intelligence work, and that's primarily part of my job, is to do a lot of open source intelligence and undercover sort of operations of cyber criminals and track people, a whole range of stuff which I'll talk about later. So, out of interest, actually, before I actually go into my talk, okay, who actually practices OPSEC here? Like, really practices OPSEC? No one's going to admit that, because then everyone will go, that's the hacker in the room, right? But yeah, okay, I know one person that does, by the way, so I'm just going to point you right out. Okay, so there's actually lessons from actually practicing OPSEC we can actually take into our everyday lives. So what I want to really talk about today are some of those lessons and some of the things that we do that give away information to the enemy, okay, or give away information to third parties, okay? And there's been obviously, I won't mention Facebook because everyone's been talking about that to death, but every piece of information we use, the smallest amount of information we use, if you're being targeted by somebody, every small piece of that information, no matter how insignificant you think it is incredibly valuable, okay? That's what I really want to go into today, okay? So, for those who don't know the background of OPSEC, the origins of OPSEC actually are derived from the US military. Actually, they came out of Vietnam, but I want to really talk about some of the stuff that actually kind of prehended that, really, from World War II, okay? But the process of OPSEC is actually just about preventing information going to the hands of the adversary, okay, or the third party, whoever you don't want that information to go to. But it's also about identifying what that information is as well. That's the most important thing. Okay. So everyone's heard loose lips may sink ships. But actually, we actually then start saying loose lips actually sink ships, because actually they did. Okay, the information given away during World War II actually did start in sinking ships. Okay, so those are the sort of things we talk about. And of course, this was actually kind of really helping drive that kind of campaign around protecting information. Now, one of the lessons that have been lost since the rise of social media and rise of how we do business online is that we don't think about where we share our data. We just go and use these sites that integrate with Facebook, or log in with Twitter, or use this app to log in with Facebook or your Google account. Every time you do that, you lose control of your data. You suddenly don't have control of it. Now, here's another question. Okay, who actually uses a different email account for every service they log into? It's always one. There's always one person. Okay. But that's really good, right? And obviously you understand the importance of doing that, right? Who has 3 email accounts they use? Good. Who has 4? Who just uses 1? There's always 1. Yes, there he is. Okay, we'll talk to you later. Okay, so there is that kind of information. So the importance is that we need to spread the information around and actually not give away too much information. Okay. The idea was, okay, the whole idea behind this before technology was to actually to make sure that we didn't give too much information and understand the importance of the information that we were sharing. Okay, understand what information we were holding, whatever form that was in, whether it was paper, whether it was inside a head, whether it was a plan, whether it was a communication. We actually protected that from the enemy. There's so many posters that I really love that talk about this. So possibly my favourite was this one here, because it's about the small bits of information you think are quite insignificant actually make up the full puzzle. Okay, so you can speak to 3 people, actually get the full picture. Okay, also, careless talk. Okay, so who's actually been on a bus or a train or a plane and heard the guy talking about the deal? Right? Yes. Okay. Or the guy that has his badge still around his neck. Do you know where he works? Okay, everyone's seen that, right? So everyone wears their lanyards, that kind of stuff. Who's actually done a LinkedIn search on that person? Yeah. Then who sat down next to them and went, "Hi, John, how's your job? How was your previous job at such and such?" Yeah? Very good point. Very, very good point. But that's the point, right? And the whole point is that people don't realise that if they were doing that in World War II, that would have been really, really bad, right? It's actually walking around with top secret papers on you. And I'm not going to talk about World War II too much, okay? But we do overshare. Everyone overshares, right? Who has still got a Facebook account here tonight? Who actually deleted their Facebook account after they heard about the CA incident? Some people? No? It's too late, right? It's already too late at that point. Okay, you've lost your data already. Okay? But the difference between now and 1940 and all this kind of stuff, that the enemy was more visible. So it was easier to kind of, there was one enemy you were dealing with. Okay, now there's multiple. Okay, it's third parties, it's cyber criminals, it's your partner, potentially. It could be anyone, right? Best mate. The point is, everyone's in a heightened state of awareness, whereas now, we're not. Okay? And our work colleagues, the enemy, insider threats, all this kind of stuff, right? Yes. I'm looking at you, Paul. Okay, so, principles of OPSEC, again, lots and lots of these things. This is probably my favourite, actually. Wise old owl sat on the oak, the more he saw, the less he spoke, the more he heard. Soldier be like the old bird, okay? Actually, basically, use your ears and don't use your mouth. That's basically what it is. Now, I want to talk about, that's the kind of the background to this, okay? Now, actually practicing OPSEC is quite difficult. If you think about it, there's, we don't discuss information in sensitive places, listening to people about, limiting information about social media, creating compartments. So who has, more than one device they use? Like, more than one phone? Yeah? He has 3 phones. That guy at the back's going to put his hand up, isn't he? He's 3 phones. Yeah? No, but the point is, we all do this, right? And by the way, as I'm doing this, I'm just learning about your OPSEC, by the way. I'm learning about you. Lots of information, just so I can use it later. But the point is, we don't, not leaving sensitive information around. This is all the stuff we talk to our colleagues about every day, right? But this is the perception of OPSEC, right? This is basically what we think OPSEC is, right? We think that we're going to be disappearing from the world, hiding and vanishing, and it kind of really isn't that, okay? That's maybe, if you're a hacker, that's what happens, but generally speaking, that's not, okay? So, what is actually OPSEC? What is it in 2018? Okay. Well, it's not just creating a pseudonym, or as a hacker would, or a black hat, or a white hat hacker. I mean, I have maybe 7 or 8 pseudonyms I use for some of the operations that I run, and obviously that's my OPSEC, right? So my OPSEC is actually making sure that they are completely segregated from my actual public identity. That's what I have to do. Okay, so most people wouldn't have to do that. Okay, but you might want to take some of those principles about segregating some of your online life, your personal life, your physical life, your in real life. Okay, and it's about sort of ensuring that critical information is protected from the eyes of the enemy. It's about protecting information. Okay, And there is a kind of reason for doing this, and I'll kind of go into this in a second, right? And if you want to practice this kind of process, and the reason you'd want to do this is because it's very, very easy to actually uncover your digital footprint. And I'll give you some examples a bit later on. But typically speaking, the quickest time I've actually managed to get enough information to seal someone's identity, date of birth, mother's maiden name, all their passwords, most of their passwords. A telephone social engineered the guy's PA, so I've got all the other information I needed, and I then used the email accounts I had and discovered where they use the email accounts, and I was able to log into all their emails, reset all their passwords. I had permission to do this, of course. I wasn't actually doing it illegally. But the point is, it took me about 25 minutes, okay? Now, if I had unlimited amount of time, I could have done a lot more damage. Okay? And most people don't think about this. We're going to walk through life thinking, yeah, we're fine, we're InfoSec professionals, we probably use two-factor authentication. There's ways to bypass that as well, which I won't go too much into. And we probably all use password managers. Does everyone use password managers, by the way? Brilliant, fantastic, good. I won't go into that too much. Who uses their password manager to generate email accounts? No? Because if I can create an email account that's attributed to my name, I still know that's you, right? Your email account's random, makes it hard for the enemy to know who it is. Okay, you still know who it is because you're in your password manager. Okay? Right, okay, so what do we say about OPSEC? What are the rules of engagement? Right, so the less people know, the less you have to worry about. Compartmentalization is key. Be aware of what you post at all times. Okay? Any information about your line should be treated as critical, and it really should. People just throw that information away. Okay? Don't use one email account, try to use ones. We've talked about this, it's great. Don't use the same password for anything, I think we know that. Use an offline, well, we know some people use online password managers, but who uses offline password managers here? Yes, brilliant, it's good. And don't post images yourself online, of course. You probably have to, but I try and limit it's took me 2.5 years to delete all my images offline apart from one. Okay, it's quite a long time to do that, because you have to go to every single site, every single hash and cache of that site, Internet Archive, try to request all this information to be deleted, right? And of course, scrub location data. We talked all about this earlier. But this isn't for everyone. I'm not expecting everyone to kind of do this because it's probably not realistic. Okay? But if I talk about how you can expose OPSEC, what I actually try and do is expose OPSEC. So one of the biggest ways is the breadcrumb information that causes the damage. That's the one small thing that I find about you think is insignificant. It's actually very significant to me because I might already have 10 or 20 other things on you. Okay? That's the whole point. So what do we do? Open source intelligence, for me, what I do is use all these tools. I have about 300-400 sites I go to. I never go to the same site. I usually follow the data. Okay, so when I follow the data, I use that to reprocess it, reevaluate it, find out more information. I know where your cat lives is really quite a good website, by the way. The cats and where they're being tagged and geolocations, absolutely fantastic. So I collect the data. Creepy as well. An absolutely fantastic tool. If anyone has actually had location services on Twitter or Instagram or anything like that, basically it's a heat map, and I can see where they're going to work every day, and in about 10 minutes I know where they live. It's brilliant. Process that and analyze that data, that's the most important part. Do the correlation of the attack, and then find that information. And when I looked at this the other day, this is basically just social media itself. There is so much data you can access, so much information we share with, and these sites share data with each other. So this is just a mess of data that I can go after at any time. Okay, it's like my playground. You just reprocess it. I had like one job I did maybe 6 months ago, where after like 3 days I had like a file this big on literally everything I had on them. Okay, and it was ridiculous. You couldn't use it, but it was just crazy. And then of course we all went to this meetup right tonight. So for me, that was brilliant because I was like, by the way, I'm not going to show your photos, but I did actually do a bit of research with some people in the room. And it was amazing because you put your interests, where you're based. Some people put their jobs in, I know Stu does, or did, his previous job. And we're going to a meetup, we're all security professionals, but I was an attacker. I'd be sitting there going, that's a gold mine, okay? For people that would have privileged access to the network that I would want to target, okay? People that might be domain admins, people that might be, may work in information security, have like valuable information. And it's all publicly there for me to just go through. It's a shopping list. And probably people who reuse their profile there elsewhere. Some people do, by the way, I know. I checked. So I can find your LinkedIn profile, your Twitter profiles maybe, and that's the whole point behind it, right? And you don't really want to be doing that, basically. So what else could I do with that? Well, telephone social engineering for me is probably the most powerful tool I have, because I could use the open source intelligence and I can make some phone calls.
Hello, Amy. In what department? Social media, copy, sort of guest marketing. Okay, come from you.
Hi, Donna speaking.
Oh, it's not Amy. She's around.
Amy?
But have I got through to the right department?
Oh, no problem. I can pass you over. She's just sitting next to me.
Okay, well, maybe you can help. It's absolutely fine.
Not on the same team, so I'll just transfer you over if that's all right.
Absolutely fine.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Of course, target her later. That's great fun.
All of you. Hello?
Hey, Amy.
Yes, speaking.
Amy, it's John from First Choice IT. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, well, good. We're just doing a bit of database work at the moment with you guys. Just checking Windows accounts and all that kind of stuff. I just want to double check. Have you had any issues logging in today at all?
No issues.
No issues. Okay, fantastic. When did you last log in today?
Sorry?
When did you last log in today? Were you logged in this morning?
Hello?
My phone's
Sorry?
super guys.
Were you logged in this morning? Were you logged in? What time did you log in today?
Twice, I think it's been fine.
Twice. Okay, fantastic. And can I confirm your email address just so I can check the systems, check if you've got any issues with the database? Okay. What's your Windows username? Your email address is different, isn't it? So.
You know where this is going, right?
Fantastic. Have you changed your password in the last 30 days at all? Okay, can you confirm the length of your password to me, please, as well, just so I can check?
The length of it?
Yes, please.
8.
8 characters. How many of those are uppercase? No. Okay, fantastic. Any numbers at all in there?
Yeah.
How many numbers? Just so I can check. Two numbers. Fantastic. Okay, let me just check. And you're logged in at the moment, did you say?
Yeah.
I can't see that. Okay, that's fantastic. Can you confirm your password just so I can check the system, please?
I'm not really sure.
It's absolutely fine. We've got authorization from the head office, so it's absolutely fine. I'll just double check for you, but that's absolutely fine. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
There you go.
On the network.
And no two-factor, and I changed all that. She actually had access to it, and I do this every week. Well, not every week, but most weeks. And I get passwords pretty much every time, depending on the pretext. So I changed all the social media profile pictures and did some stuff. It was good fun. Had permission to do that. Left a little note in every social media accounts to say, basically, you need to change your password here. Don't use that account as well. And we did an exercise as well, not too long ago. So we did a simulated attack on an organisation, and basically had permission to raid the mailboxes of an organisation and then present back a ransom message that we'd stolen loads of data and stolen stuff from a mailbox. And so what we did is we actually managed to gain a load of passwords from like some of the dumps we have. To give an example, we have about 8.4 billion records. Some of the guys that we work with co-authored Hashcat and John the Ripper. So we basically get sent any dump that happens, get sent our way. We crack them and we store them in a database offline, of course, not online. And so we basically just found loads of passwords, and we worked out that they just basically increased their password by 1. So we just basically raided the mailboxes, this company, basically took screenshots of their mailbox and then created a ransom message saying we basically raided all your mailboxes. Here's an example to prove we've done it. And then we were supposed to turn up the next day to do a simulated attack. And the simulated attack was that we sent a ransom message and we're supposed to come and do some training, and basically then we ran an instant response session, and after about 10 minutes they basically told us to stop. So because they just couldn't deal with it. And so it's very easy to do these attacks. And I guess other examples I could probably go on all night, but the point is it's very easy just to do a little bit of research on somebody and then call them up, and then I can get all the details. And I do it very, very often. I've got people giving their PIN numbers in bars and stuff like that. So we do have a weakness, and this goes back to not giving information, too much information. Now, this is one of my favourite videos. I don't know if you've seen this, but this actually shows how easy it is to exploit people's accounts.
If you like our Facebook page, we give you a free lottery and get a free pastry.
We have a new live stadium. We have a new live stadium.
Okay, I'll search Facebook now. I'll search Google. Have a phone number. I've got his email address.
Okay, Carly, are you ready?
For the information on Damien.
Yep, I am.
Mother's maiden name is his name's with
Carly, this is not coming in now to this call.
What's the name? Nicholas.
Nicola. His date of birth, 7th of May. He lives at 38A.
Just a couple of seconds.
2 children, aged 4 months. Previous address. He's got a postcode.
Yeah, got it. Damien, age 26 and a fitness instructor.
How do you know where that?
Rhoda University UCL, Martin went to South Thames College, assistant psychologist at Great Ormond Street.
And I'm a Christian as well.
Oh yeah, we know everything about you, Martin. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Anna from Russia.
This guy doesn't actually care, he just wants the free pastry to sell. He just doesn't actually care, he's happy to have free pastry. But that's it, in a minute. Do this, this is the problem, right? This is the whole problem of sharing too much information, and I'll kind of move on from that subject. So, I want to talk about some of the principles and bring it back to, something we can actually do every day. Because obviously, if you're thinking about trying to use a different email account for every service online, and except the guy at the back, of course, who did that, which is brilliant. Lots of respect for that. But it's not possible for everyone to do this. And so what I try to do is say, well, what are the things you can do to really kind of reduce that impact? Okay, and I just want to talk about some of those, right? And it's not for everyone. It's basically for everyone, right? Not people with stuff to hide. We all have stuff to hide, right? One of the things I talk about is think before you share, right? So who has a GitHub account here? Right? So they are my favourite resources. If you want to do open source intelligence than anyone, especially corporate GitHub accounts, right? More than the individual ones, right? Corporate GitHub accounts, especially if they're public, are great. Because what you can learn from a GitHub account is profile pictures, development styles, how they write their code, and so I can understand how they can compile it, and therefore I can understand basically how to attack them, right? And of course, all those lovely profile pictures I can then use to target them, spearfish them, steal their keys, all this kind of stuff. And I see it work quite a few times, right? And then, of course, make sure you don't post comments on forums, support forums. I do lots of crawling of support forums, and people their work signatures on there and all that kind of stuff, so I can then use that for phishing campaigns. I mean, it's brilliant. It's just endless amounts of information, right? And that's the kind of thing, when you're using these sites, actually, if an attacker had lots of information, would I be comfortable sharing that information with the public domain? And you probably would say no, so don't do it. By the way, I love this fence. It's my favourite fence in the world. Look at that. It's amazing. Workmanship there, okay? Right, okay, create compartments, right? So we all said, all we use is password managers. We know why we do that, so I don't need to talk about that. But basically, have a few email accounts like you guys are doing, right? But maybe make sure they don't relate back to you. Most important thing, right? Because then I can use that to attack you, know it's you, and I can find information about you. Of course, also poison. Poison your data, okay? So don't enter your real information to multiple sites, okay, if you don't need to, okay? Because that's quite important, because why should you give all this personal information away? You always use Unix timestamp, is what I always do, for everyone. So, and also the wrong name for everything. So at least if I do sign up to that site, I have confidence that it's not my real data that's being processed, okay? Of course, two-factor everything, I think we know that, so I don't think we need to talk about it too much. And then, of course, perform risk assessments, right? But personal risk assessments, and ask yourself these questions, really important questions to ask. So, look at your actual data, and actually, do you know where all your data is? And the answer to the question is probably not, but you probably want to know where it is, right? You want to understand who is actually processing it, has a hacker already got access to it, what would the impact of that? So some good questions you can ask yourself, right? Do you know where it is? Do you know what form it's in? It doesn't have to be electronic, it could be paper, right? Are you disposing, are you shredding all your paperwork? Are you doing all this kind of stuff we talk about? Very, very important. If you can't find it, how quickly would it take you to find it if you needed to? So if you had an account compromised, could you be confident you could find all your data really quickly? And if not, what would be the impact to you? We're not talking about companies here, we're talking about yourselves, everyone in the room, because that's the kind of stuff we want to impart on people, okay? Is my data encrypted? And back to your point again, the importance of having HTTPS and encryption and PGP and all these great things. It's very, very important to do that, okay? And of course, if this is publicly disclosed, what's the impact, okay? And so I've got some kind of resources I'd like to share as well as part of this. So, and I'll probably get these shared up on the meetup site after, so I'll work with Stu to get these resources. But there's a really good set of data that the community I run actually has on the Many Hats Club. Broke by Network, OPSEC resources, I think you should definitely go look at that by a young guy called Cypher, Crypto Cypher on Twitter. He's definitely worthwhile. He's doing lots of great work in that space. I did write a small article on OPSEC that apparently is page 1 on Google. Apparently I have no idea why, because the irony of that is hilarious, especially trying to hide myself. Intel Techniques, so Michael Basil's leading expert on open source intelligence. Read anything from him, and he's got some great workflows. And that actually help with actually finding your own data. That's what you want to try and do. So you should use these techniques to understand where your data might be. And of course, if you want to join a community I run, there's an invite there, and there's our website. There's this final video that was by the US military, which I thought was highly amusing. If I can get it to play, hang on. He says, he can't get it to play. Okay, well, it was a good video anyway. There you go. Probably seen enough of me anyway. So that's it. I think that's me. Any questions at all? Yes, at the back.
At the beginning of the conversation, you said about OPSEC being preventative. I think OPSEC is now detective.
Yeah, okay, so it can be both, right? So if you look at the, if you kind of create honeypots, okay, so you can, and I do this as well. So I have email accounts which I have lots of fake profiles with my name on it, but I know that people might go and find much more easily my profiles, my real profiles, and some of my alts as well. And so actually, if they do break into that, I've got an early warning system. But typically speaking, yes, if you have good OPSEC, you'll know when your data is at risk, right? And it is preventative, of course. But also it's about preventing the data getting to enemy's hands in the first place. It's not really after the horse has bolted, if that makes sense.
I know I'm getting recorded, but I disagree because I think big companies are now so diversified. Segregation of duties, some people are preventative, some people are detective, and they don't talk to each other.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Communication is vitally important, and I think the whole kind of point of this session as well is that we, as kind of security professionals, we should be going back to those kind of basics. We've lost that knowledge about preventing that. You know, we overshare. Okay, there's nothing wrong with social media, by the way. Okay, but it's about being responsible with what we share, and also being mindful of what we give to these companies, right? And then within corporates, yes, you need to have segregations of duty. That's absolutely important. But you also need to make sure people are aware of the risks of the data they expose and the data they're using, and the responsibility they have to protect the privacy of that data as well as their own data, but also the data they have custodian of as well. Does that answer your question? No. Okay. Well, maybe we'll take that offline. I think it's probably not a 2-minute discussion. There's one more question, I think. Stu?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds. There was an online question here.
There's
Can we do that first?
Gerwin Moores is asking, is there a best practice for OPSEC?
Is there a best practice for OPSEC?
Oh, I've got online questions. Look at this. I love this. There's lots of resources. So all the things we talked about, the list of controls, the list of I'm going to make the microphone go off. The list of processes that we discussed are basically best practice. There are organisations. There's an international OPSEC organisation that kind of lists out some guidelines, and I could probably share that. However, I think basically it's restricting the information and compartmentalising that information. I don't think there's like a policy for OPSEC for private sector. For the government, yes, there is, of course. There's the military. And the military, of course, have very strong guidelines for OPSEC, and there's massive consequences if that's breached because there's potentially loss of life. Okay, so it's much more strict in the military. But in the private sector, there's no real consequence. If someone has a data breach, well, that's it. Your data is exposed. You've shared that data at third party. You've trusted that third party of your data, and now they've completely exposed your OPSEC potentially. Okay. And of course, cyber criminals make the same mistakes. They make massive mistakes in OPSEC. Okay. That's why they get arrested. Right. They make huge mistakes. I mean, I think about the guy Kazes from Alphabet, basically using his an email address, a Yahoo email address, whatever it was, with his date of birth and part of his name. I mean, like that wouldn't actually get him caught. Right. So these small kind of breadcrumbs that led to him getting arrested, and this happens all the time because there's no such thing as perfect OPSEC. Okay. And there's no such thing. It's about managing risk, your own personal risk, and it's constant, okay? And that's the kind of mindset you need to get into. Right, you've got another question? Yeah.
Is that working? Ah, there we go. I've heard rumours, and I was just wondering, have you seen, you're obviously much closer to this, have you seen evidence of organised crime using big data to correlate and actually pull this data together?
Yeah, there's lots of tools out there. So if you think about the tools that I use, okay, a lot of them are open source, freely available. So all the tools that I use to do data grabbing, aggregation, big data analysis, they use. And they have probably sometimes better tools they develop themselves. So they will have APIs pulling stuff from Twitter, they'll have APIs pulling stuff from Facebook, they'll have APIs into sort of Google services, they'll have kind of big data and analytics tools that they bought through illegitimate means, and they'll be able to process this data, and that's why they are very good at targeting campaigns. But plus all the data that's publicly available from all the breaches, don't forget.
So I do a lot of the poisoning, as you suggested, in some of the stuff I use, but I'm also conscious that there are times where you can't poison the data because, you can't get that mortgage or you can't get that whatever, right?
Of course, yeah.
So how effective is that poisoning in that big data type scenario? I can't see it being very effective there.
Well, you've also got to talk about personal risk, right? So how much of a target are you? How likely is it you're going to be targeted? Okay, so you've got to look at probability and the likelihood of that and the impact, right? I shared something quite useful on Twitter the other day about a stick man on a tightrope, right? And the crocodiles underneath. Basically, the risk is the balance, right? And of course, the impact is him getting eaten by the crocodiles, right? And the likelihood is basically how likely is he to get the balance, right? And the whole point is that you need to work out how likely is it you're going to be targeted, and they're actually going to target you with that much processing power and data. And don't forget resources, right? Organised crime is a business, right? So they allocate a number of resources, they allocate amount of time, and if you raise the cost of the attack, okay, to a level, you won't be as much of a target. So as a company, maybe, as an individual, there has to be a reward for that investment. So i.e. you have enough high net worth or enough assets or money in the bank, or your data is valuable enough to actually return. And bearing in mind the dark web, which I haven't talked about today because I don't want to poison things too much, the average cost of someone's data is like 25 quid. It's not very much now because there's so much of it. So, does that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Hello. Hello.
What you're talking about, use overdramatic language, is managing legends.
So say again, sorry?
What you're talking about in overdramatic language is managing legends, right? In a sense of, and that's it can be a lot of effort. This is related to, I was thinking, just as Rob was mentioning, about using poison data. As I say, there's certain things that the system, and certainly in the UK, is not set up to allow you to use manipulated data, false date of birth, etc., etc. You can obviously try that, but it's a lot of effort to manage. And it's then that time when you need that, you've got to sort of circle. You can tell I maybe tried this. The gas account, they ask for your date of birth and it's all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Certainly Germany's a bit more switched on to this for, well, historic reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point. You're not in this country, especially, it can be very hard to completely remove yourself from the system, right? But what you're doing is limiting yourself where there are potential weaker controls. So if someone targets a gas company and steals, let's say, 20 million customers, what's the likelihood of your data actually being targeted, right? It's 1 in 20 million, right? So actually your risk is lower. Now, the data's out there. It means at some point someone will be able to do that. But then you have to then take into consideration what's the likelihood and what's the risk of that happening. And actually, do you have enough compensating controls outside of that? They can't get into your accounts anyway, so they could probably steal your identity, maybe, but they'd have to have that other bit of information as well, right? So that comes back to, again, making sure you put enough barriers in place to they go after someone else. I think there was one more question at the front here. Yes. It's always a controversial topic, don't worry.
I'm just really interested in APIs and how much information people are giving away for nothing on APIs in documentation and code snippets, particularly with automated tools.
Yeah. Okay. So if you look at when I do research on organizations I'm targeting, the first place to look at is APIs, and that tells me what data they're collecting, how much data they're processing, and actually can I actually get hold of that data through APIs. I've actually had, I can't talk about specific cases, but I've seen where APIs have been targeted by attackers, especially when also private keys haven't been as well guarded, and so they've able to get in and basically use it to recon an application more than anything else to work out how much data is in there, some of the types of data, so they could then use it to further down the line target it in earnest. So to answer your question, the online documentation tells you exactly what parameters are involved and what parameters are in the APIs and actually what calls can be made and what requests can be received. And so therefore, actually that is obviously valuable for developers because you need to have those tools, but maybe they shouldn't be as publicly available. Maybe there should be some verification. But of course, that's changing the whole industry, and I don't think we're going to be able to do that overnight.
So when you think about PSD2 and design companies creating bank interfaces, nice money-making opportunity for lots of it, perhaps.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Just a quick one. I loved the directness of your language on the telephone calls. Is that because that's what you've learned? Is just you can just go straight for the kill, or is there value in kind of Barnum language patterns and NLP? And do you have to technique people at all, or can you just go straight for the kill and people give it to you?
Oh, okay, so in that particular scenario, I have a three-step process. So step one is profiling my target, so the open source intelligence stuff. Step two is seeing how open they are to communication. So I'll connect them via sock puppets and maybe talk to them a little bit. If they're open, then I can go direct for the kill because I know they're basically an easy target. If I'm doing proper social engineering campaigns, so the average social engineering campaign I do may last a couple of days, it may last a couple of weeks. I do a lot of physical social engineering as well, so I break into buildings, which is a lot harder. So therefore I have to use NLP, instant likability. I also use a lot of humor as well, and I also use, I stutter quite a lot, stammer quite a lot sometimes, to kind of make it sound like I'm sort of useless. And then people disarm, they feel sorry for you, and then they let you in. I can basically disarm most people.
Brilliant.
So yeah, security guards are the worst, by the way. I can tell one, have I got time for one story? Okay, I can't share the company, of course. So just before Christmas, I did a physical social engineering exercise. I actually managed to break into a very large company that you would all know. Just before Christmas, quietest time of year for them, in terms of there was hardly anyone in the office, which made it incredibly difficult for me. I had no recon time, so my recon was basically Google Maps. And the night before, very, very late, turning up outside the office and going, how the hell am I going to break into this place? So I actually did some research, and I found out they had a staff shuttle bus, and it was a staff-only one. So, but they had it on their recruitment site. So I was like, oh, brilliant, but perks and benefits, also great things for me. And by the way, just on that note, if you, who writes job specs here? Are you actually, yeah, okay. Don't put all the list of controls and languages you use and so we use Apple, brilliant, I know what to target. Oh, you use Linux, brilliant, I know what to target. Oh, you use these code languages, fantastic. It's basically a hacker shopping list, right? but you need those skills as well. It's a double-edged sword. But anyway, back to my thing. So I went to the sort of situation where I had to work out how to get in. Now, I actually waited outside this train station thinking, there'll be queues of people, I'll slip right in. So the first bus came along, one person on the bus. Oh my God, how am I going to get in? The second bus came along, 2 people. And then the third bus, it was like 1. And I had to wait. And then the fourth bus was like, I'll be too late. So basically, it was me and one other guy. And I had a coffee. So I thought I usually carry coffee around. The coffee cup was actually empty. It didn't matter. And I came onto the bus, and I thought, that's it, it's game over before I can get on the bus. And he was like, sorry, sir, you can't come on the bus. I was like, okay, what am I to think of right here? You've got coffee, you know not to have coffee. And I was like, oh, yeah, sorry, it's Christmas, my mind's going crazy. So I basically, can I just keep it on the bus anyway? He went, no, you've got to dump it. So I said, okay, fine. Dumped it, got on the bus, that's fine. Me and one other guy. So I was thinking, how am I going to tailgate into this building? Bear in mind, this building has got gates all the way around it, massive gates. There's a staff gate, busted. So I had a story. So I thought, I've got one chance. You've got to have one chance, right? And that's it. If it works, you're good. If it doesn't, you're done. So basically, my story was that I'd left my pass. I had no pass. I left my pass downstairs. Usually, I'd be able to craft a pass, so everyone wears badges. Like, stuff over there, sir. And you shouldn't wear that outside the office. Anyway, because I like to take photos of them and then clone them. Or I have loads of coloured lanyards as well, every colour of the rainbow. And so I usually try and create a fake one and say it's not working so I can get in. I've got stuff on me and I'm very awkward. But I didn't have that, so I had to think of my feet. So basically, the guy popped up to me and said, sorry, sir, you fit the description of someone who doesn't seem to be wearing a pass and has a tailgate in the business. So I went, that must be my lucky day. And I said, look, I'm on a phone call. Could I just come back? Can you come back in 2 minutes? So just wrap up this call. He said, do you have an idea? I said, yes, I do. But it's on my desk, and I had to rush to get to this call because it's the only space that's available. And he went, okay, I'll come back in 10 minutes. So he obviously, I was gone. I legged it. I absolutely legged it. And then I got caught by another staff member, so my one chance is over. As luck would have it, being it was Christmas, my sponsor was actually on holiday and didn't have phone signal. So I was actually stuck in an interview room for about an hour until my second sponsor actually turned up and said, oh yeah, he's actually all right. I think they were just kidding me. So yeah, so there was a point I was trying to make. I've completely lost it. But yeah, social engineering. So you get chances and kind of do these things. I feel like this is like a stand-up show that I probably should end right now. Any other questions before I get kicked off? Okay. Yes, one more.
Can you clarify why you have to change clothes regularly?
Clarify we have to change clothes regularly. Yeah. So if you're it's because I like wearing different outfits, right? It's like a catwalk. No. So the thing I do is so if you get spotted, okay, you think you get spotted. People remember you from your clothes, and so if they don't recognise you, they'll remember like I was wearing light coloured top or this. If you wear a hoodie and then suddenly you're wearing a coat, or you're wearing this, or you're wearing a t-shirt, different colour shoes and all this kind of stuff, it throws people off the scent completely. When you're walking around, they don't see your face, right? So it does throw them off the scent. I don't always do it, but I had no choice. Usually I wear like high-vis vest, or it's a bit like the village people. Basically wearing all different kinds of outfits. But the point is that that's what you do. Right? You have to kind of change your situation. If you're embedded, properly embedded, and you've done a good pretext, and you've done the right telephone social engineering, you've booked yourself an appointment, which I always do, I'm always an auditor, just leave you alone, and that's it. You're okay until you get challenged, okay? And it's that point you need to think fast on your feet, as you said, and adapt. That was your question? Right, I'm probably going to call it a day, because I'm between you and more alcohol, right? And I can't social engineer my way out of that one. So, yeah.
Thank you to everybody online. Thank you, Stuart. Awesome. Just before we wrap up, can I tell a story of when I've social engineered? So I'm nowhere near what you can do. I went to a Fleetwood Mac gig at Wembley Arena, and I had a ticket right up in the gods. Cheapest ticket you could buy, like rose ed at the top of the arena. I've been to Wembley Arena a lot, knew the layout of the arena, and I knew that when you come into the concourse of Wembley Arena, you can either go up to your seats or you can go down to the floor. And I knew that at certain times of night they didn't check tickets going down onto the floor, and when they did check tickets, on you go. Now, I was on that gig on my own, because I'm a sad bastard, and I couldn't find anybody else that was into Fleetwood Mac. Anyway, I was desperate to get down to the front of that gig. I had a seat up there, and I was desperate to get to the front row. So what I did was I bought 2 beers from the bar, and as I walked down the stairs, and the guy stopped me, "Have you got your tickets there, mate?" And I just turned around and I said, "My wife's just at the bar. She's got tickets at the bar." He's like, "Oh, yeah, no problem." And I walked through with my 2 beers, and I stood at the front of that gig, and I got a plectrum from Lindsay Buckingham that night, and you've just got to have some bollocks, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. You don't have to be particularly, I was going to say you don't have to be particularly talented. You do to do the stuff this guy does. But if you want to get to the front of Fleetwood Mac gigs. So I was going to tell another story about one, because it gets us stops us in between going for beers at Brew. So we're going to go to Brewdog. These events don't happen without the companies that put them on. So thank you to Wood Mackenzie. They invest a lot of time and effort in doing that and putting on the beer and the pizza. Thank you to our awesome speakers, Stuart and Sean. Again, awesome content, really valuable. And thank you all for coming. Let's go and do some beers.